Hey everybody, Raul here for Bass Musician Magazine, and today we have the extraordinary honor and pleasure of chatting with bassist, producer, and ringleader for the Big Ol Nasty Getdown, John Heintz.
Hey Raul, thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure, John, my pleasure. We've got a lot of exciting things to talk about, but as always, we like to go to the past. How did you get started in music and particularly on bass?
Sure. So I got started pretty young. I started playing guitar around 6 or 7. A lot of that was in Catholic school, played in the church group. And then I think it was around 10 or 11, I decided I wanted to pursue bass and got a bass and tinkered around for a while. But honestly, I set it down right around the time that I was 17 or 18 and kind of focused more in the business side of life.
Mm-hmm.
And then picked it back up at 30 when I was getting things going with the music career, which
Gotcha.
is, yeah, it was very much out of the blue winding up in the industry the way I did.
Nice.
Especially having taken that long of a break. I think it was like a high school talent show was the last time
Mhm.
I had played, and then next thing you know, I'm in this very unique position, touring with a band called the Lee Boys, who they had a bassist, but they came into my life and offered to take me on the road with them and get me back playing and learning the business side of the industry. So it was a real cool transition that was very unexpected because I had been in the business world for the past 12 years at that point. I started real young in business and then realized that music really felt like it was my calling, and I needed to kind of revisit that whole side of my life from the past.
Indeed. Well, and with that break in between, how did you learn how to play? Are you self-taught? Have you got formal training?
No, I'm self-taught. A lot of it was just listening to the radio and trying to pick up bass lines, playing along with, whatever was on the stations at that point. It really wasn't until I wound up in the industry that I started to get exposed to a much broader palette of styles and players and things that were off the kind of commercial pop type of world and into some of the more obscure yet really cool types of sounds that were out there.
Nice. Well, and the Big Ol Nasty Get Down is a very unique kind of thing. I know when I saw a picture, I said, "How do they get that many people on stage?" And so, tell us about this concept and how it all came about.
Sure. So the Big Ol Nasty Getdown came about when I was on tour with the Lee Boys. I had experienced this kind of late night super jam that involved a bunch of players from the festival that we were at. And I watched the chemistry, and actually I was part of it as well, and experienced this chemistry that was going on amongst players with just that completely improvised, going for it type of vibe that they had, and saw the reaction of the audience and how the exchange between the musicians and the audience really led to this incredible energy and this vibe that was happening. So after that experience, I started to think about the idea of maybe trying to recreate that in a studio setting where you've got a bunch of players from different bands that may not have ever had a chance to play with one another, but were familiar with each other and the bands that they came from, and bring in some music aficionados as well into a setting and see what happens. So in December of 2007, there was this perfect window where there was about 35 musicians from 17 different bands that had some availability. And we brought them all into a house in New Orleans and had a week-long house party where we basically wrote the bulk of the first album through those late night jams and just the community vibe. And seems a lot of times people think, well, how are you putting 35 musicians on a song or whatnot? And it's not actually putting everybody on same tracks. It's kind of a natural progression throughout the night. You'll have a group of musicians there eating, and while another group's jamming in the living room and coming up with some material. And a couple people might get up from that jam, and a couple people circulate in their position they just left, and it just is an ongoing kind of cycle where it's a full lineup, but it's never trying to put everybody on the one song together. But it's grown into a really crazy lineup at this point because there's I think 225 of us from maybe 160 different bands that are part of the rotating lineup of players, and
Nice.
a lot of great bass players too. Me being a bass player, I tend to gravitate towards making sure that the bass department is filled with some incredible players.
Very nice. Well, that includes a friend of ours, Ellen Oliverdian, and her dad, Hovac.
Yes,
And
yes,
so she's such a impressive up and coming force of nature there. So it was great to see her. But again, when I saw the video with them, I'm going, wait a second, Big Ol Nasty Getdown. I'm used to seeing a bigger group, so it has a lot
sure.
of variations, which is very cool thing.
Yeah, it's really based upon the songs. No two songs have the same lineup of players, and it's a constant, just yeah, it's always different, which keeps it really fresh and interesting for me as well. And I get to work with a lot of incredible players through the course of it. Working with Ellen and Hovac was incredible. It's so fun to watch Ellen do her thing because she's so talented on so many levels, whether it's visual art, whether it's playing, whether just incredible talent. We've had a lot of fun doing stuff with them over the last few years. And the thing that's cool about working with somebody like Ellen is you're getting to experience a lot of this stuff for the first time with them. So the excitement is real, and it's a real pleasure to be able to be part of that. Whereas, some other players, it's another gig for them in a lot
Yeah.
of ways, and it's not as meaningful as something like, working with some of the younger players. But, either way, it's always awesome just to be able to work with talent like that.
Well, and certainly when we're young, there's a whole lot less of worries about the real world in our head as compared to working
Sure.
musicians. So I think we all wish that we could go back and go, gee, wasn't it much simpler when I was a kid? I didn't worry about anything. So that was.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so you guys have produced a series of albums as well. Tell us a little bit about that book, that
Sure.
discography.
Sure. So we're getting ready to release Volume 3, which is the third of the series that's kind of based upon those house gatherings. I've been mixing and matching my production style a lot, really since the pandemic, when I was able to figure out a way to do a lot of remote recording with, a ton of different players and be able to have it sound like everybody was still in the same room.
Nice.
That was a really unique opportunity because everybody was home. Everybody was looking to do something fun. And this was a really good avenue to be able to send some work people's way and have everybody continue to create due to, with everybody home. It was also much easier to get people on board because almost everybody in the project has their own touring schedule and their own thing going. So it becomes sometimes a logistical challenge to be able to just find that time to be able to get things going. But it was an interesting scenario, just having everybody home and ready to go.
Nice. Well, and it did force a lot of musicians, especially a lot of bass players I've spoken to adapt a new technological skill where a lot of them, they just delegated that to the staff, the roadie, the front of house guy. They had no idea. And one of my favorites, I talked to Lee Sklar, and he, again, was kind of benched in the pandemic. And somebody said, hey, I'm going to send you this. Can you send me some tracks? And he goes, well, I can't get to the studio. And they're like, well, no, what you need is a Focusrite and a
Yeah, yeah.
this, and we can do this. And it made him have to learn a whole skill set. Even one of the guy, I think it's the bass player for the Moody Blues, recorded a whole album in the closet in his house, and it was all on an iPad because he didn't have a board or any of this stuff. But he did layer after layer after layer, and so it created the opportunity because they were available, but it also made them have to learn. And so now you can kind of take advantage of that because a lot of people know how to lay down tracks remotely.
Sure. There's something that is missed about not having everybody in the same room. But
Hmm.
at the same time, there's also a lot missed by not having an efficient way of being able to, in an economical way, to be able to do tracks for remote projects. Because, it used to be you'd have to fly somebody in or get some studio space wherever they're located. have them go in the whole process with that, which, winds up really pushing a budget pretty thin. But in this scenario, it enabled everybody to be able to just do it at their leisure at home, not have to worry about bringing in an engineer a lot of times, not have to worry about the studio space, and just be able to plug in, like you said, to Focusrite or whatever they're working off of as the interface, and be able to just go and get a lot of work done. And I think that was a really valuable skill for people to have to really bring into their world, because it does create a lot more opportunity for them as well as as a working musician, to be able to have a lot more consistent opportunities to play on different records and so on and so forth.
Totally. Well, and the dynamic, and I get the large group in a studio is kind of the same kind of dynamic you get with, you've got a large group on stage. There's energy,
Sure.
you feed off of each other. There's a lot going on there. However, there's also the possibility that any one person can screw a whole take up.
Sure.
And then everybody's doing it all over again. Somebody missed their entrance, or they spaced, or even the logistics. If you get bleed over from a drum track into your vocals mics, or you've got all of those logistic things that are also it's a huge challenge with big groups in studios.
Sure.
You can kind of work around that, and maybe even cherry pick, get the best of what everybody can send you, and then put that together, because they've managed to execute it in a more flawless fashion. So this is kind of cool.
Yeah, and it takes some of the pressure off too, because I know sometimes, I feel like all the eyes are on me when I'm working out a part for 2 or 3 minutes, when we're tracking live, and that 2 or 3 minutes feels like hours at times, and you're holding up the process somehow. But in all reality, that's the same thing everybody goes through. But not having that little extra bit of pressure, and being able to go back and get that perfect take, or the take to the liking, helps a lot in that scenario of being able to just do it at home and not have those eyes watching.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the unique things is, because you wear multiple hats with the Big Ol Nasty Getdown, because you could be, laying down bass tracks, or you may be going, okay, I'm going to be the ringleader, and I'm going to get this other person who's on bass. How do you decide which of those hats to wear at any particular junction?
Well, when we did the Volume 2 album, I sat back and pretty much stayed on the production side, and the ringleader, if you will, side. I had Ryan Martini and Norwood Fisher as the two primary bass players for those sessions. And when you have access to players like that, it's hard for me to want to play bass, because I'm such huge fans of their work, and being able to just see them in a different environment, playing with some different musicians, and just seeing what happens is just as rewarding to me as it is for me to play bass on a track. And I've always felt like the project was never just about me. It was kind of the sum of all of the parts. And if I were going to be playing on all of my tracks, I think I would probably get bored after a while. Being able to have the ability to reach out to a lot of these incredible bassists and ask them to be part of a song or two, or be part of the bigger session, or whatever the scenario is really a lot of joy for me, because it's a chance for me to sit back and also learn as a bass player, and see how they would approach it. Because I think it's really about serving the song and finding different people that are the perfect fit for that scenario. And sometimes it's an ongoing process where, like over the pandemic, what I would do is I would start with an isolated drum track, something I had been doing a lot of work with Jack Irons, who's the original Chili Peppers drummer. And he would send me completely arranged drum tracks, and I would send it off to either bass or to keys to make the first move, and let it write itself, let the players play whatever they felt, and let it be a natural progression. And really, it was my job to make a good decision on who the next player would be, as the song was getting built up instrument by instrument. So, I think one of the first ones we did was with Hadrian, and I sent him the track, and he sent me back the bass, and I listened to it and said, okay, well, who would make the most sense to put on next? Would it be keys? Would it be guitar? Would it be this or that? And just, making decisions on the fly based upon who I have available to work with at the time. And that's always an ongoing and changing thing. I mean, especially with the number of players that we have at this point, which, is pretty wild, because I mean, I think we have an upwards of probably 30 bass players that are part of the project.
Wow.
David Pistorius, Cody Wright, Josh Paul, Rod Diaz, Hadrian, Mohini, the list goes on and on.
Yeah.
Skeet was from Parliament Funkadelic, was just on the latest single that we released. So it's always, it's cool to be able to kind of go through this whole group of players that I grew up listening to in some cases, and getting a chance to hear what they would sound like in this scenario or that scenario, and then bring them in.
Very nice. Well, and I'm sure from a producer point of view too, you can make sure that the bass comes through in the final product, because
Sure.
a lot of times I've heard sound engineers kind of just tone it back, so it's there, but you're kind of going, oh, I wish I could hear this better.
Sure, yeah.
But in the mix, they're like, not so good, not so good.
Yeah. And engineers tend to get very timid when it comes to dealing with the bass on a track. And, guitar has always been traditionally the thing that gets pushed way out front. But in this case, there is a lot more input on the bass player's side as to how it's going to shine through on the tracks. Because I love a really heavy drum beat and bass groove on the tracks. And, if it's not mixed right, if somebody's timid when it comes to dealing with those lower frequencies, it can easily get zapped out.
Yeah.
And just part of the, overall kind of wall of sound, but not able to hear the defined bass part.
Indeed. Well, and since we're talking about basses, and since we're looking at what you've surrounded yourself with, the amount of gear acquisition syndrome that you may have just based on what I've seen, tell us a little bit about how you're getting your sound, what you're playing on, and some of your favorite basses.
Sure. So when it comes to studio and live, I've got a few different ones I like to lean towards. I've been going through a Stratty phase ever since I first laid hands on American Aga, who build them out in Poland. Really just build some exquisite instruments. I have a couple of them here.
Mm-hmm.
This one they call the Hollywood. It's a holly top, and just a real functional. I mean, it's playable art as far as I'm concerned. Every single one of them is so unique. I do a lot of work with Remco Henriks, who's been doing a lot of work with Stratty lately, and he is such an outstanding fretless player. And when he's over and I'm able to just sit and listen to him on the Strattys, you really get an appreciation for how unique each one of them are, so far as the voice that the instrument has itself. I'm also a huge fan of Adamovic. This is probably my main go-to 5-string. It's a Saturn.
Nice.
I picked it up at the the Guitar Summit in Germany a couple of years ago, and I've got 4 or 5 of those in the collection. The collection kind of has been an interesting process, because I'm starting to kind of learn my own collection to some degree, and figuring out where my focus really wants to be so far as the instruments. And it's a lot of the really high-end handmade stuff is kind of in my wheelhouse right now, and then vintage. The stock basses, they're cool. I enjoy some of them, but I've been really enjoying just the artistic side of what some of these builders are doing. Let's see. I've also got, over here, I've got a couple of my signature models by Monobasso. Pull one of these out. This is the signature 5 or signature 4-string. They call it the flame bass.
And I'm glad you showed the Monobasso. We didn't see the headstock as much, because Tony he's got his unique approach to those. Yeah, between the ones that are kind of scroll like an upright bass, and this style. They're very cool. Yeah,
these I love Tony's work. He's done a lot of amazing builds that I've been watching. This is the
neat.
The sound chambers light up on these, and it was a fun idea that I had, and he was able to bring it to life, and yeah, just love his work. Let's see. Yeah, the stuff behind me, that's just some of the stuff in the collection. There's one of Stu Ham's, let's see, signature Warwicks that's behind me. Let's see, down low, that Guild acoustic, that was Patrick Dahlheimer from Live, his bass, and that was the one that was used on the MTV Unplugged episode that they did.
Oh, sweet.
So yeah, there's stuff like that, as well as kind of the stuff that really piques my interest, stuff that's stage used or has good history behind it.
Which, if I understand correctly, your collection includes one of Geddy Lee's.
Yeah. There's was it 66 4005 that was in his Big Beautiful Book of Bass.
Nice.
I got that one a few years ago, and that was wild seeing that one pop up and become available. I had never seen or heard of Geddy parting with any of his instruments, and when I reached out to him and was asking him about what the motivation was for selling it, he kind of laughed and said, "Well, he felt bad. He had six of them, and there was something that there was something that he had seen that really piqued his interest at this shop in New York, and they worked something out, and then I wound up getting wind of it and made a deal, and I actually own that with my buddy Steve. We've got a couple instruments that we have joint custody of.
There we go. They're like kids. They're like kids.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
we could obviously go on about your basses for a long time, but we should get back to
Sure.
the topic. Plans for the future. What's in the works for the Big Ol Nasty Getdown? I know you mentioned a new album releasing soon.
Yeah, September 19th, volume 3 will be out. And then there's a new album it's going to be an EP with Remco Hendricks. He and I do a lot of work together. Got another song with Ellen that's going to be coming out, hopefully I would say probably sometime before the end of the year. I'm just waiting for the vocals to go on that and to finish up a little bit of the recording. That's another one that both Hovac and Ellen are on. And again, it's been so much fun working with them. There's another artist, Izzy Savitas. She's at Berkeley right now. She's an incredible bassist out of Detroit, and she and I have an EP that we're working on. That should be coming out sometime at the beginning of next year. And then there's probably 3 or 4 more volumes worth of material that is somewhere nearing completion. So there's a lot of material that's still to be released, especially from that time during the pandemic, where it was just so we yielded just so much material during that time. I think something like 100 tracks in 18 months or something. And
Wow.
Players and Primus and Suicidal Tendencies and Korn and you name it, just everybody was open to working on some stuff. Let's see, there's also a lot of material, Josh Paul coming out. I do a lot of work with Josh, and I love his playing. He's one of my favorites. And more with Norwood from Fishbone and Peanut from 311. There's just a lot of amazing players.
Very cool. Well, and if people want to know what's coming in the works, where's the best place for them to look to find out?
I would say on the Instagram page at Big Ol Nasty Getdown, and the website's usually up to date, www.bigolnastygetdown.com. And then, pretty much all the social platforms we're on. We're starting to get more into the video world, so YouTube is starting to light up, and a lot of good things happening there. So
very, very cool. Well, it's a lot of very exciting stuff. I guess the only thing that we'll miss is actually seeing a band on stage, because everybody is so attached to everything else. But this is a great way to enjoy it as well.
Sure. We actually will play live from time to time. Once I get these couple albums out and I can really focus on the live aspect, I'll put the band back out on the road. And usually that's a big undertaking. There's somewhere between 20 or more of us that are out for that run. So it's a lot of moving parts, a lot of people to move from town to town. But when it works, it's just so much fun. And the hangs are great too, because you have so many people with such different histories, but awesome histories to be able to hear about. some of their experience and some of those great stories from the road and so on and so forth. I basically was raised around P-Funk when I first got started in the industry. I spent a lot of time with them either on the road or in the studio and learned a lot. And so I'm used to big bands. I'm used to a lot of people being part of the production, and it feels weird, the idea of taking a 3-piece out or a 5-piece out. It's just it's just kind of second nature, the big productions, because you can do so much with a big band like that whether it comes to a theatric side or just your vocal harmonies or being able to have character interplay with the different musicians and different parts of the set. So it makes it a lot of fun, where it's almost like a big family reunion every night when we get back together and go up and do the thing.
Very, very cool. Well, John, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to talk with us, sharing all the insights about the Big Ol Nasty Getdown. Folks, make sure you check him out. Go to the website, go on social media. You've seen him here on Bass Musician Magazine, John Heintz.
Thanks so much, Raul. It was a real pleasure talking with you.
My pleasure.